Let's let's start there. So, what your car's here today, obviously.
Well, that's a rental car,
Oh,
actually.
so that's still not your car.
That's still not
You
my
still don't have your car?
After a month and a half, I still don't have my car. I was impressed. And the crazy part is that they're always, I call them about once or twice a week to hear the status. And they're like, oh, the parts are being sent at the end of the week. Oh, early next week. And they keep pushing it back. So at that point, I'm like, I don't know when I'm going to get my car. I have this rental car right now. Hopefully I'll get it soon. But yeah, given I'm 6'6", I can't really fit in that. I'm like scrunched up a little bit, but it is what it is.
I was surprised to see it this morning. I was like, Tyrone's a big dude. Like, you had a duck coming in the door.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel the same way in my car. Like, my head touches the roof, and I'm like, I can just barely see over the road. So, it's a struggle, but.
Man. So what happened in the accident?
So, I was driving to my house, and just somebody was at the stop sign, and then just went right in front of me. Didn't have time to see them because the car in front of me was turning right into their lane, and it was a bigger truck, so they couldn't see me behind. And then they just pulled out, and so they didn't have time to slow down, hit them, and then that was a month and a half ago.
Dang. And it was right before you were going to France, right?
It was right before I was going to go to France. I actually pushed France back for another week because I had to take care of my car. It was actually 3 days before I was supposed to leave for France. And so I had to call the insurance, do all that stuff for my car. And so I had to push France back another week, but it's fine.
Were you able to switch your flight and everything okay?
Yeah. It was fine, I think, because I have the Flying's Blue Pass, so I have some type of insurance for it, so I didn't have to pay any extra to push it back. So, yeah.
How long had it been since you had been to France the last time?
A year and a half. Last Christmas, and then my parents came last year for my college graduation, and then before this past Christmas, but the one before, so Christmas of 2021. Before that, I haven't gone by in 3-4 years prior to COVID, a year prior to COVID actually, because that's when I just had the idea for UNext. And so I was like, Mom, I would love to come, but I just started this business and I really want to start developing it. And so she was like, oh, okay, I get it. And then later that year, COVID hit. So unfortunate. But yeah, so it's my second time in the past 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was probably, that was when UNext was fresh before you had any capital. And that was an idea, right?
Yeah, that was an idea. At first, it was called Knowledge Seeker. And so
I didn't know that.
That was our first name. We started it, two of my, not co-founder, because we just started it for a school project originally. We started it for this school project, and then we didn't know what we were going to do. At first, the original idea for UNext at the time, Knowledge Seeker, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but we would connect students to retired professionals in the field just so they can ask questions and be kind of this mentor to the students.
Okay.
So we did that for a few months for the competition. Then the competition released, and then I wanted to continue the business, so I flipped it to more recent professionals, and so that's how it really all started. But first it was Knowledge Seeker, which sounds corny now that I think about it, like Knowledge Seeker, but at the time we needed a name, and so
yeah. It's the stakes are a little bit different for a school project versus trying to get someone to give you a bunch of money to make something come to life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like if they were at the table and they said Knowledge Seeker, they'd probably be like,
yeah,
what's the next one coming in here?
Let's pass. No.
Yeah.
And then UNext just came because I don't know. I really wanted to find a name that had a double entendre. And so UNext for your next in your career and UNext for universities next. And so it's like for students their next path, or high school student their next path at the university, and for the university students their next path is to be employed. And so, yeah, that's really the reasoning behind creating UNext.
Yeah. And at that time, I remember we had a chance to talk about this quite a bit. Like you kind of diagnosed that need, right? Where you saw that students couldn't, like, there was no good way to get a shadow. Like most students won't just send an email or something like that and say, hey, can I come in? Although most people will answer and say yes. But that bridge between that, you kind of noticed there wasn't one, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So first I noticed that, and that was crazy to me, but a lot of students didn't even know what a job shadowing was. Still, yeah. So I'm like, okay, how could they get connected if their only way that's being promoted by the universities is through internships and jobs? Why don't they just put more focus on job shadowing? And a lot of universities didn't include those services in their career services, and didn't help students. And I started having more conversation with students because I found that problem myself. And so I started off as a computer science major, like to create stuff from scratch, like to see my idea flourish. And that's something that's been with me since I can remember. And so I thought that really computer science was the path for me. And then I tried getting help connecting to a short-term opportunity. I didn't know if that would be just a 1-hour conversation or a job shadowing, but I wanted some type of connection in the computer science field because I didn't really know anyone. And I knew that the professional world was different than just the classes I was learning. And so it took me about 7 months to land a shadowing opportunity in computer science. Did the shadowing, and I realized that computer science wasn't for me because you have to sit in front of the desk just cranking code for hours on end. And I'm like, I need more interaction. I need to work on different projects, not just one project for 2 weeks straight, just cranking code. So I like the creative aspects of it. I love the computer aspects of it, but I understood that the lifestyle wasn't for me. And so I looked for other shadowing opportunities in different fields and industry, and more especially around business, because that was my next field of interest. And I really started loving more marketing stuff, more entrepreneurship. And so I knew that I wanted to go within this avenue of just marketing and entrepreneurship in general, because me growing in France, and that's something that I've learned between the two different cultures, is that in France, entrepreneurship isn't discussed, isn't thought, isn't displayed on TV. Like, for example, Shark Tank. I never knew what Shark Tank was until I moved to the US, and that just teaches kids, adults, teenagers, whatever it may be, about entrepreneurship. And in France, that you don't have access to that. So I didn't really know entrepreneurship was possible. I thought it was just completely separate field, that it was just something I just never thought of growing up. But going back to your original question, I'm kind of like rambling on, but then I realized that marketing and entrepreneurship was for me. And then I started asking other students about, have they gotten connected outside of internships and jobs? And a lot would come to me saying, oh, I've heard good things about your shadowing opportunity. And I started doing more research, and everything was just very similar, just internships and jobs. And so that's when I found a true disconnect in really helping the students understand their major prior to committing to an internship or a job, really making sure that is the right one for them. But furthermore, and something that a lot of students overlook, is making sure that the employer shares the same culture and that you're a good cultural fit, and that employers have different cultures. And a lot of students don't think that way. They think that, oh, because I'm working at one job in this company, the same job in this other company would be the same, but it's really not. And so a lot of students don't really think about that. So shadowing really enables the student to understand different cultures, different job responsibilities, and then just really overall expands the student network, which at the end of the day, the network is key, and definitely when finding a job. And so really helping students understand the the meaning behind shadowing opportunities and how that can help them in their career. And so doing more research on that and finding that there isn't a lot of options, if any, for students out there. And so that's when Knowledge Seeker originally started, but then transmitted into UNext.
Yeah. Yeah. How old were you when you moved to the U.S. from France?
I was 15 years old.
15.
Yeah.
That's so it probably, I mean, outside of seeing Shark Tank for the first time, that's a huge cultural shift in general.
Yeah.
How was it? Explain it.
Yeah. So my dad is from the Milwaukee area. He went to Marquette University, played basketball there, and then played professional basketball over in France. So that's where he met my mom. And so I grew up spending the school year in France in the summertime in the US. So I had a good understanding of the culture during the summertime, because then winter comes and then you get a lot of snow here, which I wasn't ready for. And then just the school in general here is completely different than in France. And then just the culture around learning is completely different. And so that was a big shift. But in terms of the language, I knew how to speak English since I can remember, because I used to speak English with my dad and French with my mom. And so that really wasn't a change. I had family here, so I had connections, and then going to school, you meet other people. So it was, the connection thing really wasn't the issue, but I would want to say the educational piece and just how everyone just freely talked about money, which I wasn't used to it. And I know it sounds abnormal, but in France, and I know a lot of countries in Europe, they're really closed off about discussing financials when it comes to entrepreneurship or investing or different strategies around money. And so when I came to the US and I saw that there was classes teaching about money, there's shows teaching about money, people talk about investing strategies all the time, and that's something that I was not used to in France. And so that kind of got me thinking about business and entrepreneurship early on, because I didn't really know that was a possibility. And I think that's something awesome that comes with this country. And so, yeah, that's something I really wasn't or haven't been acclaimed to yet.
Yeah, that shift at like a pivotal time too that has to be part of like why you can look at things the way you do, right? Mm-hmm. Because having that drastic change and seeing the differences and maybe the lapses of what's better or worse in different things probably started you off at a young age to say, okay, here's how I can provide something else that's better than what's available.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think in retrospect, same with France as well, because in France, they do a lot better job at connecting students to their career early on. I mean, elementary school even. And so coming to the U.S. and seeing the lack of that, but then the U.S. has more of something and France have the lack of something, it gave me, like you said, a good perspective on the two different cultures and how to really adapt, serve in different cultures based on what I see work in France, not work in the U.S., so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's like the value of diverse thought in a nutshell, right? Like
exactly.
Why diverse thought is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, just growing up in the two different cultures, it was probably enabled me to have this entrepreneurship mind of seeing different markets, so in France and in the U.S., and really adapting to that.
Yeah. Do you remember a specific turning point when you were like, maybe I want to be a business owner? Like, maybe that's for me.
I had interest in it from a young age, but I didn't think it was possible. So it was like in the back of my mind, but it was never something I was like, I want to do that. I just had interest in starting something. It wasn't even particularly business, but just starting something. And what was the pivotal point? I feel like there was. Okay. In high school, I had a friend that did, and that's actually that good thing you asked that question, because that just reminded me. So I had a friend that started e-commerce before e-commerce was like really big on social media and media in general. So he was getting items from Wish or Alibaba or something like that, and then reselling it in the US and making a profit. And I thought that was really cool because I've never seen it before. The internet wasn't talking about it at the time. And I thought that was really cool. And I didn't know how he would do it because at the time I didn't know about Wish and AliExpress. It was like, I just got my supplier and he has cheaper items than in the US. So I get them, I do this type of marketing and just the structure of everything. And at the time I was a sophomore in high school. So 2015. And so he was a sophomore in high school as well. And I just saw the structure that he had. He was making money. He had fun. He was in the sector that he really liked. He was growing. He was learning. And I just thought about it. And I was like, man, this guy is so cool. He established this structure. He is so motivated. He loves what he's doing. And I think that was the first really introduction that I had to not only business, but hearing somebody talk about their business, how they structured their business. And that's when I was like, that's really cool. I kind of want to do something like that now. And so, yeah, I think that was the first introduction to business. We became friends, talked about business for a little bit. And then I took a computer science class and I enjoyed it. So I wanted to go more that route. But first introduction to business, my friend, from high school. Yeah.
The people that got into that early made some bucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fascinating. It lines up directly with when you started like seeing those conversations of entrepreneurial and stuff being a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So to switch a little bit, you said your dad played professional basketball. You played a lot of basketball too. I mean, tell me about that. You were great in high school. You started playing at UWGB. How long did you play there? And kind of what was your basketball story?
Yeah. So my dad grew up in Milwaukee, played high school basketball in Milwaukee. Really famous basketball player. He was one of the best in the state, had multiple offers to play Division I, chose Marquette, played 4 years at Marquette University. He's in their Hall of Fame. For anyone that watches that, his name is Tyrone Powell, if you guys know him. But yeah, so
did you love basketball from a young age too?
Yeah. So he moved to France. And I remember him as a professional athlete. That's my earliest memories, is him on the basketball court, just playing, traveling a lot, of course, during basketball season and then coming back and playing. So my earliest memories were of basketball. And fun facts, and I don't remember this, but my first steps were on a basketball court, actually chasing a basketball, apparently, which I found out not too long ago. And so that's a fun fact. But yeah, so just seeing my dad being this professional athlete on the basketball court, just spending a lot of hours, and then him starting to teach me about basketball, it was in my genes. And so I just picked it up because I love the sport, and then played basketball, started in a club at 4, but probably dribbled around the house earlier than that. And then in France, and then just really loved basketball in general, but I just love sports. So I always religiously played basketball, but on the side, I played soccer. I did handball, which isn't a famous sport in the US, but it's a mix of soccer and basketball. And then I did judo. I did a little bit of karate. I did volleyball. I played instruments. And so I had passion in all these different sports and hobbies and such, but basketball was my main one. So I religiously played basketball over the years and tapped into other sports. And then I moved. So I was born 45 minutes north of Paris, and then I played basketball there. But I remember I always played basketball because they didn't have youth leagues. I always played basketball 1, 2, sometimes 3 levels up. And so I was always the smallest one there, even though I'm tall for my age, but when you get moved up, you're the smallest one. So it enabled me to look at basketball in a different way and play in a different way. Like, I was shorter and smaller than everyone else. And so growing up playing basketball against older people, then when you get older, it just changes your game and enables you to be a lot better. I want to say that.
Well, how much of it is confidence?
Yeah.
So much of sports is confidence. And like, was your dad like behind that? Was he like, we're gonna get Tyrone playing kids bigger than him? That like, was that his plan? You think?
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if it was. I don't know if it was, but maybe it was. But yeah, so much of it is confident, and that definitely builds your confidence up because you play against these people that are so much older than you at the time you think they are. And
yeah,
then,
when you're 9, a 11-year-old is huge.
yeah, exactly, right?
Like, that's an adult.
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I thought. Like, I was like, if I can play against them and do well against them, going against my age should be a walk in the park. And so that really enabled me to wire my mind. But talking about confidence, and that's another thing, is that in the US, they have a different confidence, and especially about sports, because, I mean, trash talking in the US is just so common. In France, you would never see that. Like, people do not trash talk, and like that competitive aspect is something that is really prevalent in the US, but not too much in other countries. And so my dad like taught me that mindset of being just ultra competitive in sport and then just always working harder. And so that really translated into sports and then business and everything in general. But that's something that's really American, because in France, they don't really have that. They have that competitive aspect around sports, but not to the extent of the US.
Yeah, and I mean, you could see the difference in NBA players of players that aren't from the U.S. and players that are.
Yeah.
Like, you can generally see, I mean, nuanced differences in their game, but differences in the mental aspect of the game and how they approach it and how they interact with not only the other team, but their teammates and stuff. It's fascinating to see.
And just hearing the stories, I mean, like on Netflix about the Dream Team, the Redeem Team, and all of that. You see those, they go at each other, they trash talk each other, and they just go hard. And that's something that isn't common in other countries. And you play basketball as well. You were an athlete as well. So you definitely understand like how trash talking works and how that brings the best into athletes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
There's that ultra famous story about Kobe. When they played Pau Gasol, I'm pretty sure it was in the Olympics, and Kobe told the team, he's like, I'm going to run right through him, the first play of the game. And then he did it, and I, like, now hearing this, I've never thought I'd been able to think about it through this light. Like, imagine what Pau probably kind of knew because they were friends, but, like, imagine what Pau's teammates thought of that. Like, you know what? The people had to be awestruck from something like that. And that's the mentality of Kobe, you know? And, I mean, Kobe, kind of a similar story, right? I mean, Kobe grew up in France, too.
I think it was Italy.
Italy it was, yeah.
Yeah, his dad, so similar story to mine. So his dad is American, played professional basketball in Italy, so overseas. And yeah, he grew up there and then moved to the U.S. I don't know. I think he moved in high school, but I'm not sure. Maybe it was earlier than that. So yeah, similar story. And then, yeah, that's a funny story. I mean, his team was probably like, are they good? Like, do they not like each other? Are we seeing one version of them? But yeah, that's funny. That's funny. And see, after that, they just became friends. That's just a mentality that a lot of countries outside of the U.S. just aren't used to. And I mean, he's Kobe, so he's definitely a different breed. But yeah.
Yeah. So did you run into any of those different nuances of the game? Being like, I mean, you had to play some in Europe at some points, and then here like the actual like playing of the game outside of like the mental aspect. I mean, they play a little bit different too. Did you run into any of that? Did that affect any of your game here or vice versa?
Yeah, definitely. It's different basketball games. So it took actually a lot of adjusting because in the US, they like to dribble and ISO, and it's a lot more individualistic in the US. While in France, if you take more than 5 dribbles, your coach will take you out. You're like, you got to pass that and you'll shoot it if you're open. So it's two different ball games. And then growing up, I didn't really understood it as a kid. And I played more so with the Americanized version of basketball, which is it's okay to sometimes take 5 dribble in place and then just pass the ball and such. And then growing up, that's when I really started understanding, okay, this is way different because when you're a kid, the team isn't really organized. It's just you play basketball. But then when I started, so I'll go back a little bit. But then I moved to the south of France after 10 years around Paris. And then when I moved to the south of France, I started playing in teenager basketball, and that's when they start recruiting for professional camps. That's when they really start recruiting. So I was playing a lot more competitive, and I started playing throughout France, and that's when I realized, holy crap, I can't just take 3 dribbles between my leg, cross somebody, and go to the rim. Everybody's good now. And so that's really when European basketball started kicking in, and then I would do the summers in the US where I would just pass, and then all of a sudden somebody takes 5 dribbles, go to the hole, make a basket, and our coach doesn't care. So I started really implementing both, I want to say a year or two before I moved to the US, where I really started understanding how my game could transition from France into the US, because I started wanting to be a point guard. And so I needed to dribble a lot more. And so that really came in handy with practicing with the older kids and then going into the US and such. And so that's when my game really elevated. And then I got invited to play got selected for the youth national team for France. And so that's when I really started getting looks from professional teams in France. And that's really when my basketball career started taking a turn for the better. And so then I decided to move to the US in high school, played basketball there. And then that
was probably a hard decision, right? Because over there, that's a unique scenario where your dad played professionally. So that's probably a certain advantage at some points that people know your name, they know your dad, but at the same point, the opportunity was probably different here, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it was a tough decision. I mean, so I had a few options. I could go to a professional team in France. They have youth teams underneath the professional team, and so when you get older, that increases your chances of playing professionally for that team. You play more basketball, it's more structured. And so that was a big opportunity for me to continuously grow in my, at the time, NBA aspirations. And so I was strongly debating that, but then I wanted to move to the US as well because this is the basketball capital. My dad had a lot to teach me, and so I was just really hesitant, and I love just the U.S. culture, and I know that eventually I wanted to move here. And so that decision was a tough one. I talked to a lot of people about it, friends, family, and decided to come to the U.S. And now that I think about it, if I wouldn't have made that decision, I probably would have went to high school and college in France, and so that would have just changed the course of my life. And so I decided to go to the U.S., and that was a big decision. One of the biggest one I've had to take yet.
Yeah. So, when you think like towards the end of that, then when basketball starts maybe diminishing and entrepreneurship, business ownership starts climbing. That's another decision. Like how did you approach that in life?
Yeah. So then, I played 2 years of basketball at UW Green Bay. And halfway into my second year, so halfway into my sophomore year, the idea of UNext started to come into fruition. I want to say quite not yet, but I started to think about it and started to ask questions about it, talk to people about it. And so UNext started to be more and more on my mind. And then basketball, I was just still playing basketball with the team, loved it. And then all of a sudden, I had a conversation with the career services at GB and then an employer, and they really loved the idea, and they started to give me feedback on how that could work. And then that employer, I asked him for a reference, and he gave me the name of 5 other employers. And that's when I started really having a structured plan around UNext to see where
a door started to creak open.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The door, like I could see the light at the end of the door. So I just started to find more and more interest in business and just building that entire infrastructure. And I don't know, for some reason, I started spending more and more time with business than basketball. And then finals hits, and I had basketball, business, and finals. And so I was like, okay, I don't know how much longer I can take of all the mix of all three, because even till this day, I don't know how I did it. Like just mixing the three, which individually are all super time consuming. I had no life for solid 2 to 3 months. And so I understood that in order for me to scale UNext, I would have to either drop school or basketball. I was not going to drop school. So I really had to have a conversation with myself, not only, but my family, friends, and just get their perspective on basketball, on business. And at that time, I could see myself playing professional basketball less and less. I was like, I love basketball, but could I see it as one of my careers? I knew I wasn't going to make it to the NBA unless I spent another 10 hours every day playing basketball and therefore leave UNext. And I didn't want to leave UNext, which at the time it was not a secret. And so, just a whole bunch of conversation. And I decided to pick UNext and had the conversation with my coach. I explained UNext, he loved it. And so, I decided to step away from basketball. But, I mean, after 19 years of playing basketball at that time, it was a tough decision, but
probably freeing in some way, right? Like a deep breath of, wow.
I mean, initially, yes, but then I want to say a year after stopping basketball, I started missing, and I think that was partially my fault because I went from being an athlete playing D1 college basketball to not really playing any sports, rarely, because I was just so focused on school and UNext. And so a year went by, and then I started to miss basketball a lot. I started to miss the competition, just the memories that you have on and off the court with your team, just the chemistry within the team. You could definitely transition that into business, but it's a little bit different than with sports because you're active, you're playing sports as well. And so I missed that aspect. And so I understood that I needed to be more active sports-wise. I can't go from playing sports all the time to just doing business. And so I started reintegrating sports within my daily routines, and that's when it went a lot better and started to free myself again. But initially just stopping basketball, it was like this freeing, like, okay, I think I made the right decision. My business is going well. I love what I'm doing right now. This is great. And then eventually it started picking up. So I I cold turkey really stopped playing a lot of sports, but that wasn't the right decision mentally.
Yeah.
And so when I started picking that back up, it was a lot more freeing once again. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really neat to think about both the overlaps of similarities, but at the same time the massive differences between like a commitment to and a dedication to being good at a sport or being an athlete, and having a business or being in business. It doesn't have to even be yours. I think long-term successes, being an athlete transitions to success in the business world so well, because athletes know how to set a goal and work towards a goal. And I mean, it teaches us so much discipline, right? Like, especially, you said it, I think it gets overlooked, the commitment that any D1 athlete takes to their time and out of their life. Like, we don't see the work that gets put in by those athletes. And then you think about how that dedication and that discipline, how that equates to success in the business world. It does for everybody, right? But at the same time, I think one of the main differences, and something that I noticed, outside of just like it being great for your mental health to be active and keep your body engaged so you can keep your mind engaged. Outside of that, even, I think one of the huge differences that I've diagnosed is that business successes take so long. They take so long. And you have to, that discipline is working towards something. But in sports, like if you're practicing 6 days a week, 7 days a week basketball, even if you go run an open gym, you can cross a dude up and you're like, all right, my work's working. And that's great for your brain. Like, your confidence keeps you going. That doesn't happen so much in business unless, like, you get super lucky where you have a random conversation that you can spit out an elevator pitch quick and they're like, okay, here's my card.
Right.
Other than that, it's like this slow burn towards success where athletes, that was one thing I missed. It was like immediately you can see your work come into play. Like, if I love golf, if I chip and putt for an hour, I can go on the green. And if I knock a few chips close, I'm like, all right, that's why I'm here.
Right.
Being a business owner isn't like that. Everything takes so long and you have to be so patient. And I think that's a big difference.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true, because I remember the day before, if I just spend 5 hours just constantly shooting threes, and then I just take the day off, and then the next day at practice, I would just make a lot more threes because the day prior, I just shot 1,000 threes. But in business, and that's something that I was not ready for when starting UNext. Nobody is, exactly. Like, no, everyone thinks a business is just going to go smoothly like that if they have a plan. It is so far from the truth. And I didn't think that, because in basketball, it's like you do the right things, you put in the hours, and within a week, you're going to start to see significant results. In business, it's like you put in the hours, you do the research, you grow this piece for a few months, and then all of a sudden the market changes, or there's a new competitor, or there's always something moving in business, and you're like, now I need to readjust everything I just did, or I need to think about this in a different way, or you learn something new, and that just changes everything. And so business is definitely a roller coaster, but like you said, athletes just do well in this area because of the discipline and the hard work, because everyone I played against, especially at the Division I level, the amount of hours that they put in just working on basketball, just saying no to things just to make workouts, make games, and all of that is just a lot of discipline, hard work, and doing it even though you don't want to do it. And so that definitely transition into business. And so that is one aspects of sports that really transition, is the discipline and the hard work that it takes to become good at a sport, and then just transitioning that into business. But additionally, there's another aspect that I want to touch on, because I've seen it a lot of times, is that's not necessarily true for everyone, but I guess it is true for everyone, but it depends what they get themselves into. So if an athlete decides to start a business, but they don't necessarily like it, or they enjoy playing their sports more than doing the business, they'll be like, you know what? maybe I can relax this week. And so they'll have a different mentality over their business or venture or anything that they do that's not sports related. And so it's really and that's the hard thing about athletes is really once you're not playing sports anymore, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And so that's been a reoccurring topic, and I actually talked to a lot of my old teammates regarding my business and how I transitioned from sports to business, and they're like, I don't know what I want to do now. How did you come up to that? And so they have this hunger that they had in sports where they want to work on something, but they just don't know what. So it's really for athletes is understanding what do I love to do that's not sports related that I could possibly do as a career if I don't do sports. And that's the hardest part of it all. But once athletes really figure that piece of themselves out, then they can put in the hours that they did with sports. But it's not necessarily a guarantee that an athlete would work as hard in their career as they did in their sports. So it wires your brain to do so, but then you have to do some self-searching to see, okay, I know I can put in the work and the hours, but what am I going to put it in?
And what am I passionate about?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Thinking about that, all I can think about is the agility you mentioned there and how much AI is going to change what your business is doing or evolve what your business is doing. What have you found with AI so far?
I mean, AI is scary. I was not expecting AI to be this powerful. And I thought it would come in segments. Well, I did think AI would be this powerful eventually, but not right away. And it took some exploring. Just understanding the different types of AI that are out there is just a research on its own. But then the possibilities that you can do with AI is really looking at it from a different perspective, because there's so many different things that AI can do right now that nobody has ever thought of. And it's just who's going to be the first one to understand that AI works this certain way. So it's just spending a lot of time with AI, just teaching it, but also enabling it to teach you some things. And so just understanding how it works, how you can code around it, implement it in different software is just a long journey of just learning a new skill. It's just like learning a new sport, learning something new. And that's something that I've always been passionate about. And if I find something interesting, I start learning about it and I find it a lot more interesting. And that could be a flaw or benefit of mine, to find so many different things interesting. But yeah, AI has definitely enabled us to do business a lot easier, get more done, but also just looking at different industries in a new way. And so AI is going to be a long process to implement in different industries, and there's small steps to doing it, but recognizing, okay, how can that affect the recruiting industry which we're in, or how can college student take advantage of this piece? And so really understanding how it can change markets. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have like a process for something like that? Like as you carry this weight of, founder, right? Like this is your thing. The UNext is your, it's your baby that's developing into hopefully everything you want it to be and more. What's your process for like, recognizing the need for a change and then going through the steps to, one, determine if you need it, or two, once you do, implementing that change? Like how do you work through those types of things?
Yeah, so the first aspect is, like you said, do I need it or do I want it? And being a startup, being so small, you really have to be careful what you do with your resources, because that could put you a month behind or a month forward. And so do I need it or do I want it? And then if I need it, then I know this may be weird, but I ask myself again, do I really need it though? And so that enables me to do a lot more research on it and to find out if I can implement it in our capacity. So in terms of code, budget, time. Sorry.
That's okay. Everything, so much is budget at that point. So much.
Almost all of it. I mean, just budget and time in general. And so, yeah, just doing the proper research, but also having a lot of conversations about it. And so which goes with hand in hand with research, but before I implement something, I'll talk to 50 different peoples about it and then just get their point of view. And then I'll look if it fits into the market. I'll look at if anyone else is doing it and how they're doing it and what happened when they implemented it, when they didn't implement it. And so there is this entire process that I look for, but the main one is, does it align with our mission and values? Does this align with UNext? And first you have to establish what UNext is, and that really enables a business owner to just look outside of their business. And so what I mean by that is business owners should always fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And so a lot of business owners, they find the problem and then they find their solution, and they're just so focused on their solution that they don't look at different ways to solve their problem that may not be their solution, but that could get there faster or more convenient. And so a lot of business owners just get so focused on the way that I'm doing it is the best way and there's no other way. And so if you fall in love with the problem and not your solution, you'll constantly look for new ways to make your business better. And with maybe not when you have an established business that you prove yourself, then you know that your solution is a powerhouse in the industry, and so you can kind of just add to that. But when you're a startup and when you're constantly analyzing the market and trying to penetrate it in different ways, you have to fall in love with the problem, and understanding different tools can just, even if you're not going to implement it, can enable you to maybe a year down the line find a new way of doing something, even if you're not going to implement it now. If you have a good understanding of AI, which I think all startups should have, especially in the tech world, even if you're not going to implement it now, maybe a year or two down the line, you're going to remember something, and that's going to enable you to pivot. So yeah, there's a lot of research I do. I could talk about this all day, obviously, but yeah, falling in love with the problem, not the solution, really enables you to look at your business in a completely different way.
That's such a great way to look at it, because when you stop solving problems, you stop making progress. Like, and then, you know, that there's an adage, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but it's either, it boils down to you're either making progress or going forward or moving backwards. Like there's no like staying stagnant. Yeah. And if you're not solving the next problem, those problems are eventually going to eat you more and more and more. That's such a fantastic way to look at it. I've never heard it put that way, but that's great, man. Yeah. Is that something you came up with? Did you get that from a mentor?
I did. I get that from the Blueprint program here in town. Is for small startups in Green Bay, just to have an accelerator, talk to mentors and such. And what was his name? I think Rashad was his name. And he was like, when you have a startup, you need to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And all of a sudden I paused. I was like, wait a second, what did you just say? Because I never looked at it that way. And when he said that, I just like did an entire break on UNext. And I was like, okay, what pieces can I add? Like, what is our problem? And now that's, once we establish our mission, our vision, then the problem really falls into those lines, and the problem statement, of course. And then once we add something, we're like, does that fit into our problem? Does that fit into what we're trying to solve? And there's so many different ways of thinking outside of the box that it may not look like your initial idea, but it will solve the same problem. And yeah, that's been a game changer.
Absolutely. Those nuggets always come from mentors like that. And I think a lot of people, even those that are extremely successful in business or whatever work they do, I think overlook the importance of mentors or someone that's done the same thing you're trying to do, albeit it could be in a completely different capacity or something. But A lot of times, similar to our conversation about sports to business, success overlaps. It happens for a reason. And when you can find somebody that has success, and then if you get the opportunity to ask them questions about digging for the reason about what drove that success, you can often find it, and I guarantee that's one of that guy's.
Yeah.
That's one of his probably staples of however he got to wherever he's now.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't talked to a single successful startup, which a startup that still running and growing, that hasn't had at least one mentor. Like, a mentor is so important in growth. And I would not be where I am today and not have the lessons and just the opportunities that I had today if it wasn't for a great mentor or different mentors or just different people just giving me insight. And that's the thing about business. You have to always be learning. You never know everything ever. And so you just have to constantly ask questions, even if they're hard, even if they, to you, may sound stupid, but they probably are great questions. And so getting outside of that habit of being too afraid to ask certain questions or thinking you know it already, so you don't want to talk about it. So just making sure to constantly being a sponge and learning. And so that's what every business owner should do, is just surround themselves with people that have done it, that are doing it, and just bounce ideas. And that really enables you to have different aspects of business that then makes it a lot easier to pivot or to look at it a new way, and just learning. Just about learning.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another interesting thing about startups in general I wanted to ask you about today, it's something that I've never encountered in the pursuits that I've done. What's it like trying to get investors? What is that process like? Like, I think I'm trying to remember, you used a phrase one time when we were chatting. It was like you had an angel investor or something like that. And I've wondered what that was since. And I've never went down that path. My entrepreneurial pursuits have been more of the grassroots, ground up, my own capital, and then I try to build something out of that. And what you've done in like the startup atmosphere, and what a lot of tech almost has to do in a lot of aspects to compete, is to start bigger. You have this idea, but in order to start big, you have to get capital. What is it like trying to get investors, and what does that process even look like?
Yeah, so I don't have any angel or VC investors within the organization. I had many conversations, and that's a round that we're gonna open up later this year. But I have individual investors. But that process, man, I mean, it's something that I didn't understand for the longest, and I started having conversation with investors, and they just threw all these terms at me: convertible notes, the cap table, safe notes, just different aspects of getting an investment. And so I was like, I have no idea what any of this is. And so I just started educating myself on just overall angel and VCs investors. And so it's a very long process and a lot of time. And what I didn't know is, if an investor says no right away, then you continuously grow and send them updates. A couple months later, they'll be like, okay, now I'm ready to give you an investment. And that's not something that's...
It's like trying to get a date with a girl you like.
Right? Like, no, okay, let me try this. No, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about business that way. That's the funny part. It's like, that's funny that you bring that up. It's like, it just wired me different, because usually I saw no as no. Like, once somebody says no, that means they're not interested. Why continuously bother them? And so that was really a change. I was like, okay, you said no now, but next week I'll send you this send out. And then the week after I'll send you this send out. And then we're doing this report, so I'll send you this out. And then okay, maybe we can have another conversation next month about it. And so it was just not giving up, which enabled us to really have a lot of investor interest, investor just relationships. And in order to have an investment, I mean, over the years, we've spoken to at least 30 to 50 different investors groups. And so you have to just constantly talk to investors. And not only that, but it's how you talk to them, how you present to them. So when we went up to investors and said, we want an investment to do this, 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 and this, they always had reasons. They're always in their mind saying, why would I not invest in this startup? And when you come up to them as, I need an investment to do this, 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 and this, their part of their brain is wired to say, okay, they want an investment, but now I'm gonna look at every aspect of their business to see why I shouldn't give them an investment.
They're looking for like holes in the dam, right? Like problems
exactly,
or issues.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're like a lot more lenient on those. And then we changed our perspective on how we were talking to investors, and we were like, we're doing this now, and then this is how it's growing. I would love to get your feedback on what we're doing. And so now the conversation becomes them helping us grow and seeing how it could fit into different markets. So you're really changing how you're approaching investors about it. And now when we started doing that, we had investors saying, okay, now let's meet again. They started getting a lot more interested in giving us an investment. And they're like, let me connect you to this person, and then you close this agreement, and then I'll start aligning more investors for you guys to get your next round. And so it's not more so of evaluating and saying yes or no, but approaching investors as mentors. And then that enabled us to get a lot more interest in our ventures. And when we will open around probably later in 2023 or early 2024, we'll have a lot more contact from investors, a lot more investor conversations, and then overall they'll be a lot more in tune where we've been and where we are now, and they would have seen that growth and work with us through that growth, that it makes it a lot easier for them to give us an investment. So yeah, that's definitely been the approach of changing how you approach investors, but really how you just see contacts in general, relationships in general with investors. Is just forget about the investment. Help me as a business, and then if you guys are interested of investing in the way, then we can talk about that. So
yeah.
Yeah.
How do all those transitions happen once you have investors? That has to be interesting, like, because you know, at the on the one hand, it has to grow and develop and evolve into what it's going to be. That's how it's going to succeed. But at the same time, if you have a couple different investors who might see things a different way, it has to be interesting having those continual conversations about, okay, here's how we need to pivot and why. And then it's a whole nother round of the kind of the first thing again, right? Them trying to poke holes in the pivot, probably.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. And that's the great part, is that there is a lot of investors out there. And that's another thing that differs from France is, I don't know, one VC or angel investor in France, and in the US there's so much, and it's just having all these conversations, which is very time consuming, and a lot of things you do in startups is super time consuming. So just talking to all these investors, it's a lot more time, especially if you pivot, is longer conversations. But if there's an investor that really loves what you're doing, could see aligns with your vision and everything and how you're doing it, they're a good fit. But if you talk to another investor and just say, you shouldn't be doing this, no, that's not it, that doesn't mean they're right. Just because they're an investor, they have the money, that doesn't mean they're the ruler and the knower of everything. And so it's just finding the right investor that believes in your idea and could see it go through. And so just being honest with investors, having as many conversations as possible, is just enabling you to understand your pivot a lot more, because they will have intake and input into the way you pivot. But managing that, yes, I haven't gone through the process of the agreements for investors and just having to redo that cap table based on a new wave of investors, but that's something that I'll have to deal with soon. So I can't tap onto all these aspects until I really experienced it. But right now I'm doing research. So maybe we could talk again in a couple of years and then see where we are at with everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've always wondered about that. I've always wondered about that aspect. Like you mentioned Shark Tank earlier. I'm sure that's the tip of the iceberg. I know they must have conversations with producers and stuff beforehand about here's what you might be asked. Here's what you should be able to provide. Because, I mean, some of those are seasoned businesses, but some of them are people that are building something in their garage or something like that. I mean, so many people have entered into that arena the same way you did. And it's just the willingness to grow and learn and solve the problems that you're going to encounter.
Yeah.
So, I've always wondered what that process looked like. Because you would think, hearing you talk about those investors, the successful ones are probably problem solvers in their own right. They're supporters instead of directors. Because, I mean, I like leadership a lot, and I like talking about and, looking at leadership through different lenses. And I mean, that's what effective leaders do. They support their people into success as opposed to direct them into success. Investors got to be the same way. Like if someone comes in too rigid, they should start the business and then run it how they want, right? I would think anyway.
I mean, there's all types of investors. I mean, all types of leadership styles, investors. And so, yeah, it's super important for a startup to find the right one because, I mean, investors and they want to make money out of their ventures. And a lot of startups sign deals that once they exit, they get a fraction of the money they actually thought they were getting, or the VC or any investors just take control of the company and then therefore change management. So founders have to be very careful of which investor they decide to partner with, because usually that takes up the lifetime of the business. And so it's like, yes, they're giving you capital in terms of money, but are they really helping you in any other way? And if they're not, is their money worth what is to come after? And so that's what a lot of startups think is, okay, I need to find an investor that'll give me the money and then we'll be able to grow. But if an investor is willing to give you the money but want to change parts of your business, parts of the leadership teams or whatever it may be, are they a good fit? And can you just take the hit right now and go to another investor? And so that's something that startup founders have to be really careful about, because there's really all types of VCs.
That's interesting. In starting the podcast, I had some conversations to see if anybody may want to sponsor from the beginning. And one of the people that I was talking to asked how much creative control they would have, and my answer was very blunt. It was zero. Like we wouldn't have any creative control.
Right.
Like I have a vision for what it's going to be, and I think it can be successful. And ultimately, like they understood that. That didn't come into negotiations or anything like that. But the question in itself was interesting to me, because it mirrors kind of what you're saying about how hands-on or off somebody can be. That same thing happens, I think, a lot in the music industry, and we've seen a transition of people making music under labels in different ways. There was a really cool thing. I saw a musician named Jelly Roll talking about this, where he would only sign a deal that he maintained full creative control of his music. And there's the total flip side of that we've seen, where someone just gets like created canned music that's made for the radio, and then both can make a bunch of money. But as the musician, it's like being the business owner. It's what's not only what's your product, but what's your intention for this product? Because being successful is one thing monetarily. Being successful with a mission-based platform of something that you're passionate about, like you are connecting people to careers, is a whole nother thing that could get lost in the shuffle of someone that says, I know how to make money and I know how to make money now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's very interesting, because it enables someone to understand their personal brand in themselves, not only in the music industry, but in business, sports, whatever it may be, is what am I looking to do with this venture? And if someone comes along and has something that you value, of course they want something else from it, whether it be equity, salary, another connections, or if they're just a mentor and just looking to do good, that's well. But if they want to be a sponsor or anything, they're going to want something else. And so it's really understanding, are they a good fit for me or not? And that comes with personal brand, which I love to discuss and overview, but it's just really understanding what is your personal brand. And I think you touched on it great. Are you looking to make canned music that a lot of variety of people will probably like, or do you want to do more personal music that your audience that really represent what you love to do? And so it's just understanding who you want to be and the type of artists, athletes, business owner, whatever it may be, that you want to be.
What's the mission statement of UNext?
To enable students to grow within their careers and graduate with a career that they love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that's so needed. I know you know my one of my previous role as a career advisor, just like having those conversations, the need for that is I don't want to say dire, because it's not like, it's not life or death, but in some ways it is, because like that happiness translates in different ways. And I don't think humans are innately ingrained with the capability to make that decision without some help and guidance. Whether it's conversations with your family, that's one thing I've taken from our conversation so far today, is that you lean on the people around you. Mm-hmm. And not everyone does that, but it's so helpful at different times. And I'm definitely guilty of it, where I've throughout my life made decisions in my own little silo,
Mm-hmm.
like I go into like my think tank and I don't take in enough outside perspective from the people around me. And that's a huge part in making that transition from, student, child, adolescent to adult, career, post-education. Not only what you think and feel, does it align with what everyone else sees? And is your personal brand what you think it is? Like, is
That's a hard question. It's
always hard. It'll be hard all the time. So anything that can make that come to life, like I don't know that we've ever talked about the actual mission statement of UNext, but I assumed as much it would be something like that.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard, and don't get me wrong, I also like to spend a lot of time within myself, just thinking about aspects by myself. But in order for me to make a very important life-changing decisions, I have to consult my family and my friends. It's just, they know you the best. Of course, I'm hoping people really spend time to understanding themselves, but they are the second people that knows you the best. And so just getting their input is just crucial. Even if you don't agree with it, just hearing their reasoning and why they think that may help you look at it through a new lens. And so that's something that I've gotten better over the years at. But yeah, it's hard. But understanding your personal brand is even harder, I feel like.
It's harder. Yeah, it's harder to, like, it's so hard when you have the discipline and working towards something that we talked to earlier. It's hard to have that and then remember to take time and stop and look at other perspectives, because like you get so caught up in the work that you're doing, progressing towards something, that it's like, here's what I do. Mm-hmm. And then it's not like, how is what I do being perceived? Is it what I should be doing? And taking in those other, not only opinions, but other perceptions of what's happening is so valuable.
Yeah.
And, looking inward and stuff, another thing I wanted to talk with you about was meditation and how that goes into your wellness. And like, that's kind of the opposite side, right? The opposite side of taking everything in. Meditation and mindfulness is about, taking time to be with yourself and look with yourself. How does that come into your day-to-day life? I know it's something that you're passionate about and do.
Yeah. Without meditation, I don't think I could do what I do, to be honest. Meditation really enables me to relax my mind. And oftentimes when I have a lot of things going on throughout the day, I have several different meetings about different topics, and then I have all this information being fed to my brain, then I'll take a 30-minute break and my mind would not stop. Like my mind would be like, oh, you need to do this, 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 and this. Oh, you just got this idea. Oh, you got to send this email. Oh, you have to respond. Oh, you have to do this. And so it's constantly going, and it's so overwhelming. And if you had it or other viewers have it, but it's this overwhelming aspects in your brain that just doesn't allow you to rest. And so I just understood that in order for you to make the best decision, you have to have a clear mind. And if your brain can't rest, can you make great decisions? And so meditation really enabled me to do that. If I feel stressed, if I feel overwhelmed, if I feel like I'm not going the right direction, or even if I feel like I am going the right direction, I just take some time, breathe, 5 to 10 minutes, just that, and then just going back to my day. And so meditation can come in multiple ways. You can just sit, just meditate, but meditation can just be just staring at a tree, staring at the sky, and just shutting down your brain, or just slowly thinking about just one single aspect and just kind of letting it go. And what meditation did, and I know this may like not sound good for business, but it enabled me to not take things too seriously. And so I love business, and that's something I'm not like, I love business, I love everything that I do, but I know that it isn't me. Like, I could do something else, I could do whatever, but it doesn't define me. I'm the only person that defines myself. And so just being able to disconnect yourself from basketball, from your profession, from your relationship, being able to see yourself as your own entity enabled me to reduce my anxiety a lot. Because first starting UNext, I had so much anxiety, and when I was able to differentiate myself from my business, from being a student, from being all those different aspects of my life, it just enabled me to be a lot more clear-minded, but also just to reduce my anxiety. And I want to say I barely have anxiety nowadays, but when first starting UNext, it was something that was so bad because I was so out of my comfort zone, and I didn't know how to get back into my comfort zone. And so that's something that just meditation really enabled me to refocus on.
Yeah, it's so hearing your journey with that, it just rings loudly. I started meditating probably about 3 years ago now,
Nice.
and the not taking things so seriously is one of the main reasons that I do it, and I've enjoyed it, and I've kept doing it because my whole life up until a certain point a few years ago, I was very good at, I probably leaned on compartmentalizing a little bit, but I was really good at not taking things too seriously. And then I became a dad, and like it completely
Really?
changed how I like view everything I do in life. Like I was really good at being laissez-faire in my normal life. Like, I didn't take anything overwhelmingly seriously. I worked really hard. I had good discipline, but I constantly was really good at not taking things too seriously. And that was great for my mental health.
Yeah.
Like I was in a fantastic place, my whole life. Cause I was like, whatever, if it doesn't work out, I'll do something else.
Yeah.
Then I became a dad, and like, I don't know, there's this, I always felt this like creeping pressure on me of not only providing, but like living up to the expectations of myself. And then I started putting a ton of pressure on decisions that weren't, earth shattering. Like I was putting too much pressure on these decisions. And then I would get to this point where the brain overload that you were talking about earlier, where like there's 9,000 things in my brain, and how am I supposed to focus on solving any of those problems if they're all there? So that's why I started meditating seriously. I had delved into it a little bit prior to that, but then I diagnosed that need of like, I can't function effectively, because I noticed my coinciding with that, the outcomes of what I was doing weren't as favorable as they were prior to starting to feel those ways. And that's in a lot of different ways. That's not just career, that's friend and family, that's the people who I interact with, strangers who I interact with. All of that stuff was being affected and is still being affected by the shift in that mentality. And it wasn't something that I was completely ready for, to tell you the truth. It was because that's such a stark difference to what I was used to in my life, of how I would make decisions and how I would just operate on a day-to-day basis. And it's funny because like a lot of my successes I attribute to that laissez-faire attitude, which is really weird to think about. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
we talk about discipline and the importance of all these things, but like I firmly believe a lot of my successes have come from not taking it too seriously. And I'm consistently trying to find different ways to do that again and still. And meditation is one of the ways that's allowed me to do that.
Yeah, and so how has that transmitted? And so at what point in time did you realize, oh, I don't have that laissez-faire attitude towards everything? And what really made you realize that you wanted to make that flip? Like, was there a triggering point?
There's not a specific one that I can think about. If I think about kind of the root of what made me make that decision is probably my interactions with people close around me. Okay. They shifted and recognizing that kind of, it made me uneasy a little bit, because I know that's not my true authentic self coming out, but it's the burden of those thoughts coming out. And I was lucky enough to not have those come out so much throughout life, because people get that for a host of different reasons. People feel pressure for so many different reasons, and mine just happened to wait until it was responsible for another human. Like that's when mine started to come out. But they come out at all different times and in different ways. And mine would have been trying to see my interactions with people close to me through their eyes. And constantly I'm still trying to do that, because I'm still working at it. My mind isn't in the place that it was, and it probably never will be. We develop into a different thing. But working towards it is really important to me, to try to nurture that skill, because it's something I've not only value about my prior self, or if you want to call it a prior self, my historical self, but I think it's important to the success of those relationships and the outcomes just in general of life. I think it's important for me to be able to look at it through a way that I used to.
Yeah, so it sounds like, and I believe in that too, but I like to have the balance of laissez-faire, but also a balance of discipline, because I feel like if I'm too much in the laissez-faire, or just whatever. Wait, how should I phrase this? What's another synonym for laissez-faire?
Whatever works.
Okay.
Nonchalant about it. Whatever happens.
Yeah, exactly. And so in the laissez-faire attitude, if I'm always in that attitude, and that's something that I guess sports taught me, is to rewire the current mood that you're in. And so in sports, and athletes definitely can relate, before a game, if you have your music on, your focus, you're ready, you're changing your internal, I like to call it vibration, but internal mood. And so you're getting ready for the game. And so you have these different aspects of just how you just interact with people around you before a game, or just look at life. And so it goes furthermore, and I learned that about a year ago, is you can really change your attitude towards what are you trying to be productive in. So I'll come up with a different headspace, mood, and attitude if I start planning for a marketing strategy. And then once we start looking at the development of the website, I'll just completely change how I view things and the mood that I have, and start doing that. If we start, if we start talking about making different lists or algorithms within a platform, I just change my vibrations on that. And then if I go in a sales call or whatever it may be, I just continuously change how I feel, how I think. And so really being able to change that is the balance, which then come with, I know it sounds like pretty in depth, but with the laissez-faire. So when you're nonchalant about everything, you can look at it, but from a perspective that's higher up, and be more critical about it. And then once you understand that, you can kind of sector your energy into these different compartments. And when you started talking to me and you said when you talk to your family, you were able to get these different perspectives, and that kind of reminded me of just when you have this laissez-faire attitude, that you can like look at it from high up and come about it with these different angles of energy and mood and focus in general. And that's really a benefit of just having that mentality, is looking at it at a more controlled and organized point of view. And when you said that, that just reminded me of this. But
yeah, the balance between those two things is a constant game, you know. I like to look at it as like, you know, set your vision, work to that with all the discipline you can, but be comfortable and know that it's probably not going to work out just like that. And that's okay, you know. And there's this a cool this is widely talked about as like the find a gift mentality. Like, you know, if it's probably not going to work out how you exactly picture it, good, bad, or indifferent, what's the gift from that? You know, like what happens to you, you know, like look at your accident, for example, and not having a car for 2 months. You know, it's a one on the spectrum of, man, you don't want that to happen, but what's the gift in that? There's probably something that you could dig out that's a positive from that. And I think that kind of third piece to those two things is important, because it allows you to take some of that pressure or some of that like because when you, it's hard because when you set those sights and you become disciplined in that, you feel like you're gradually earning something. And then if it shifts or changes, you're like, oh, it's really easy to say, all that work was for nothing or something. But what's the gift from that? Maybe you learned something that you didn't know before that you're going to use in a different way in 3 years that you would have never known if you didn't. There's always a gift. And integrating that third piece into those two things, I think, is important to the balance, because that is hard. The differentiating and kind of flip-flopping seemingly between discipline and structure, and then at the same time, like, well, it is what it is.
No, you put it perfectly. And I mean, just looking for that gift it's something that you must have as an entrepreneur, but even as a professional and everything, because nothing is guaranteed in business. And if you think you're spending 5 years of your life building a startup that all of a sudden doesn't work out, you didn't just lose 5 years of your life. You had so many experiences, lessons that you can change your life maybe in another 5 years. You never know. And just looking at it from that aspect, I completely agree. And those three components, I'll start looking at all them side by side. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's the mental part of life in general is so important, and that's why I was excited to talk with you about meditation, because it, like, even people that meditate, I've met so many people or know so many people that, like, I didn't know, like, meditated or practiced mindfulness until, because it's not something that comes up in conversation regularly, right? Like, we've known each other for quite a while, and just our last conversation, I found out that you meditated.
Yeah.
It's I don't know, it's helped me a lot.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think that I would be way too overwhelmed without meditation. I would have a lot of anxiety, and it just enabled me to recenter myself. And for me, it's crucial. And I think that every entrepreneur or any professional should have something that relaxes them, refocuses them. And for me, just doing that quickly is through meditation. And I think that it's the perfect balance for just what I'm doing, because it's so much pressure and so much time, and having something to really reroute your brain is very crucial for me. And yeah, I had no idea you meditated as well. So that's super interesting. But yeah.
Did you meditate as an athlete?
Oh, yeah.
You did?
I started meditation when I was 16, 17. Because I understood the benefits that it had in, like, rerouting the mind, because sometimes I just felt like my mind was elsewhere, and I needed to really just being able to refocus my energy or my mind into different aspects. And so I did it a lot, again, like 16, 17 area. Then when I got to like 19, 20, I did a break. I used to do it every day before that, and then took a break and probably did it once or twice a week. And then I went a couple months without doing it, and I just immediately saw the difference. It was night and day. My mind was completely elsewhere. My anxiety was back. And so I really understood that meditation was crucial, and then I picked it back up. And when I did, I mean, it was night and day again, and it just enabled me to recenter myself and just look at it from an other perspective.
Yeah. What do you do now? You said you reintegrated athletics back into your life. What do you do to stay active now?
I run a lot. I grew up hating running for some reason.
Yeah, me too. Still do. Still do.
I mean, it's nicer now. I mean, I used to just hate running just to run. Now I'm okay with it. So if I don't do anything, I run. Then I'll lift. I'll play basketball. Sometimes I'll do Muay Thai when I have time.
I don't know the difference between all those things. What's Muay Thai?
Muay Thai is kind of like kickboxing.
Okay.
And then what else do I do? I try to play tennis. There's not a lot of people that play tennis, but anytime somebody play tennis, I'm always down to play tennis. But yeah, the two things I do the most is probably running and lifting at this time. When I can, basketball. But yeah.
I haven't been able to transition to being a runner. I've always hated running, still do.
Really?
Yeah, I can go play basketball for 2 hours, but I just can't go for a run. I don't have it in me.
Why is that? It's just the single motion of just constantly running?
Yeah, I think it's funny. All that's flashing through my mind right now is there's a show on HBO called Eastbound and Down, and Kenny Powers is talking to a person, and I think he says he was in track or whatever, and Kenny Powers says, I'm good at sports. I'm not trying to be the best at practicing, and that's what I look at running as. Like I just it's so monotonous, and I bet it's freeing when you can get to it, but I can't. So now I haven't made that transition. I'm jealous of people that can, because it's so quick. Like, I found out recently, a couple months ago, like I sprained my ankle, so I haven't been able to play basketball. So I've been looking for those different outlets and trying to find what they were. And it's been a lot of like yoga and in one place type exercises for me that have helped. I can do more push-ups right now than I've ever been able to in my life. Just
Really?
solely because of that, man. Because
of yoga?
No, because of spraining my ankle.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been able to like do anything to, get those brain circuits firing and release that tension in any way. So I started just doing like push-ups on top of the yoga that I would do. And that's been my outlet. But I'm jealous of folks like it because you can get a run in like 20 minutes and have a pretty good workout. Mm-hmm. Fitting inside a busy life, that's good. Basketball can't do that. I'll probably start playing again soon, but that's a 2-hour endeavor. Like when you said when I can play basketball, it's like, do I have a chunk of time? And does it align with when other people are?
Exactly. I mean, that's probably the only reason why I picked up running, because it was my least favorite part about basketball was the running part. And so I just grew up not liking running. But for some reason, I only like running when it's early in the morning. For some reason, I don't know why. I don't like running at night. I don't like running in the middle of the day. I don't know, just something about just seeing the sunrise and then just having that breeze from the morning and then just knowing that like the whole day. It's just how my mind is programmed in the morning when I run is like the only time I really enjoy running, which is so weird. And I don't know why that's like that, but yeah.
Yeah. There's something really invigorating about mornings. I joke all the time that, my day starts at its peak. Like I wake up like a golden retriever, like I wake up ready to go, and my wife isn't a morning person, so it's hilarious, man. Like I wake up just ready to go, and she's one of those wakes up with one eye squinted, like needs her coffee type thing. And like my day starts here and then it gradually goes down. Like there's something about mornings. Like I love a morning hike, like going for a hike in the morning, like there's something about how it centers me for the day that I really, really enjoy. So I can appreciate that aspect. I've never tried that. Maybe that's the secret. I've never tried waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go running. I go on hikes and stuff. Maybe that's when I just need to sprint out my door.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, if I wait later, I just know I'm not going to do it if I don't do it in the morning, and I enjoy it. But yeah, I mean, I view it as if I don't completely win the morning, then it's just harder for me to do things during the day. Like if I don't get a quick sweat in the morning, send a few emails out, meditate, and then just do something productive, even if I'm not just necessarily working on UNext, but doing something productive towards my life. Like once I like get those 2-3 hours done in the morning, then the day just goes by a lot easier. Like I'm just more focused and able to do my job more efficiently. And I don't know. And when starting UNext, I didn't have that mentality. And I think that business just rerouted my mind towards being more of a morning person, which I thought you were born a morning or night person, but I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I haven't always been a morning person.
Oh yeah.
How did you were in France for a long time? How did that shift your mentality about your business and your wellness and just like your day-to-day routine? Because you didn't work much when you were there, right? Or at all. Like it was kind of a go there to spend time with people, right?
Yeah. So I was there for a month. And then are you talking about this past time I was in France?
This time. Yeah, because you were there for quite some time, and I know as a founder of a startup, you probably got a little I'm sure anxious at times, right? Like, oh my goodness, this work has to be done. But how did you spend a month there and remove yourself from everything?
Yeah, so for the first 2 weeks, I spent my mornings up to like 1 p.m. still working on UNext. So I did a little bit of work. It was hard to have calls because we're 7 hours ahead, so it was hard to align those. So I try to limit the amounts of calls that I had, but also still being able to work for the 2 first weeks in the morning because we did some traveling, but it was nearby. And so that was a lot more freeing because that's something I was nervous about going to France. Is a month there, I better get some work done. There's no way I'm going a whole month without getting work done. And so previously, I mean, before France, I worked every day, 7 days a week, on weekends, weekdays, didn't matter. And so going to France and just not working for sometimes 3 to 4 days, the 2 weeks afterwards, it was nerve-wracking a little bit. And it wasn't until the last few days that I was really able to enjoy that. And I feel like sometimes I'm like victim of that, but sometimes I don't live in the present moment enough. And it's so hard with your startup, always thinking about the next move and the next move and what else could happen from there, and then still focusing on the present moment. So it's like during my whole entire workday, I'm just like thinking about the future and how that could affect the future. But living in the present moment is still something I'm working on. And just the last few days, I just started to just being like present and like, okay, I'm not doing business now. Let me refocus my mentality, because oftentimes I was just with my family. We were just laying on the beach, and then I'm just thinking about work, thinking about what we could do and such. And I was in and out of conversations, and it just took a lot of time to just focus on just that moment. And so it enabled me to, once I came back, it enabled me to really, so we're pivoting and we're like re-putting a lot of effort, but it enabled me to look at pivoting in a new lens and being more like relaxed, because I was able to take the 5 days. And I think since the creation of UNext, I don't think I've spent 5 days in a row where I was really like present with my family and just kind of like zoned job out for a little bit. And once I got done with those like last, I want to say, yeah, anywhere from 3 to 5 days, I just like, that's for some reason that like enabled me to look at UNext in a more clear way in the pivoting process. And when we did our pivoting plan, I was a lot more detail oriented into that adjustment. And so I think that it took me a while to adjust to not thinking about business, but it was definitely tough. It was tough. I feel like my mind is so programmed into thinking about the future, and so spending 2 weeks trying to stay off of a computer is kind of hard. But yeah, eventually it hit, and that actually felt really good. Yeah.
Man, I'm really excited for UNext, but I'm excited for you, man. It's got so much potential.
Thank you.
I just, the sky's the limit. It has to be so exciting.
It is very exciting. I mean,
so it's hard not to keep working, you know?
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's so hard not to think about work or work. But yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I just think about the future, and I'm like, I don't try to get too excited about it, because if I get too excited about it, I don't look at it at the proper angle.
And you start caring too much.
Yeah, I start caring. Right. I lose the nonchalant, but yeah, no. It's like I have to. And that's something that I've seen in a podcast when I was in high school is, don't let the highs be too high, but don't let the lows be too low. And if you let the highs be too high, you'll be blinded by what could actually happen. And if you let the lows be too low, you won't be open to new opportunities. And so I try to look at what UNext can be, but also not get too excited about it and just stay focused on what we need to do right now. And I think that was a hard thing to change about it, because when something great happens, you want to feel excellent about it and just celebrate it, but you know that when something happens, something else could happen. So just not letting the highs be too high and lows be too low is like one of the main things I've worked on my whole life and continuously working on. But
yeah. I had a golf coach that was one of his mentalities
Really?
for golfing. Yeah, like golf is one of the most humbling sports there could be, right? Like I golfed yesterday and had a great ball striking day. Hit the ball fantastic, and I could go out tomorrow and I could not. It's such a humbling sport. So I always remember that, thinking about like, you can hit 6 great shots in a row, but don't start thinking that's where you are.
Right.
The highs and lows, you gotta come back to the middle for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tyrone, I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been great
thank
talking
you,
with
man.
you.
Already. That was fun. That was fun talking to you, man. And I love doing this. So let me know if you want to do it again.
Absolutely.